Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It is Friday, October the 28th, 2022. My last Friday live for October. Can you believe that? We're almost in November. This year is flying by at a rapid rate of knots. But good afternoon. Like I said, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I know this is just starting to filter through that I've just gone live. So if you are joining me live, welcome, welcome. It is Friday, October the 28th. And I was just saying my last live for October. Crazy. We're almost in November. So if you're just joining me, welcome. It's Fiona Lukis here. And this is my Friday live where I go live every Friday. Happy to answer any questions that you have around life, relationships, anything at all. Feel free to bring it to the table and I will do my absolute best to answer it for you. Anyway, I hope all is well in your world. I hope that you've had a wonderful week so far and that you are looking forward to the weekend. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, it's Friday afternoon. I know for those of you in Canada and the US, it's Thursday evening. So wherever you are, welcome, welcome. Please feel free to say hi in the comments. Let me know who's tuning in and where you are in the world. I would really, really appreciate it. It is freezing here today. So definitely not a spring day in Melbourne. It's about 12 degrees Celsius, which is pretty much winter for us, and grey, cold, windy, raining. So spring feels like it's miles away for us at the moment. So wherever you are, I hope that you are warm and dry. Now, I've got a couple of things I want to chat with you about today, some things that I've seen show up this week in as you know, I do this on Fridays. If I've seen some themes that have shown up in my client work or with my relatable students, I will share those with you on these lives and, obviously answer any questions. I've had a couple of people send me some questions through, so I'll also be answering those. But if you do have a question that you would like me to answer, feel free to pop it in the comment section below and I will absolutely take care of that for you today. All right. So, one of the things that I've really noticed this week, and I've noticed this coming up in my client work and obviously on the live calls with my relatable students. So we get together twice a week and, they ask me all sorts of questions through the lens of the understanding that I'm teaching. So these are some of the things that I've seen showing up through them. Hi, Nicholas. It's nice and warm here in Sydney. Well, good for you because you guys have had a lot of rain. So I'm happy for you that it's nice and warm where you are. It is certainly not warm where we are. Hi, John. Nice to have you on the call. When you say EQ, can you just clarify what you mean? Because that can easily be misconstrued. So could you just expand on what you mean by EQ? That can mean a lot of different things to different people. If you could do that for me, I'll happily answer those questions. So I want to talk first about the couple of themes that I've seen. Okay, all right, cool. I thought that's what you meant, but just wanted to check, John. Okay, and absolutely, I'll talk about emotional intelligence. So I want to just touch on, and this will actually kind of hook into what you're talking about, John. But a theme that I've seen quite a lot this week coming up, and it does tie in with emotional intelligence, is our ability to navigate. And this is something that you have to understand in every single relationship in your life. One of the things that I see missing in so many approaches out there, particularly in the counseling realm, because we get very focused on talking about the problem and solving a problem and solving an issue, and that would look like on the surface that would be a great way to move forward if you're feeling stuck. But if there's no emotional intelligence, then that can become quite diabolical for two people to talk about. All right, because you do need emotional intelligence to solve emotional problems. All right. Without it, it's not possible. It doesn't matter how much you talk about it. Okay. You need emotional intelligence first. Now, a big part of that is, and this is something that I think is so, so, so fundamentally important. And what I see with my clients and with the people in my relatable program is people cannot believe how much more confidence they have, how much calmer they feel, how much more insightful they are when it comes to dealing with their own frailties and somebody else's. Now, frailties, and these are just the places we go when we're not feeling so great, when emotional intelligence is low. Frailties are a part and parcel of every human being on the planet. Okay? Everybody has them. They can be emotional frailties, they can be behavioral frailties, but we all have them and you will never, ever, ever get rid of them. Okay. Now, don't hear that as doom and gloom, right? But hear that in a really positive way, because what does it mean when you can't get rid of something? You learn how to adjust to it. It's a bit like outside. Okay. It is gray, it is cold, it is windy. There are certain things I'm not going to do in this kind of weather. I can't change the weather. It is what it is, but I will adjust to it because I understand the repercussions of trying to do certain things when the weather's like this. Okay. So it takes away a whole lot of overthinking, fear, worry, resistance, trying to push against something, and brings in a lot more room for acceptance. Okay, now when we are acceptance and understanding, when we are accepting and understanding of our own frailties and somebody else's, we stop making that the benchmark with which we operate from. We stop holding that against each other. We stop making ourselves wrong about it, and we stop making the other person wrong about it. Okay, this does wonders for increasing our level of emotional intelligence, because when you are making yourself wrong or somebody else, your level of emotional intelligence falls through the floor. Okay. Now, one of the things that we have to know how to do, and this, in my opinion, is an essential life skill, hence why I call being good at relationships, being relatable, an essential life skill. And it is a skill that you can learn. Okay. And it is something that is open to anybody and everybody. And the way it flows out is your relatability at work. And I was just having a conversation with a client today about a very toxic, passive aggressive manager that he's trying to navigate and deal with, and we were just talking about how much harder they're making everything for themselves and everyone around them. So it flows out at work, it flows out at home, it flows out with your family, it flows out into your everyday levels of joy, connectedness, presence, etc. Right, and it flows out into every interaction in your life. So frailties and knowing how to navigate them are, in my opinion, as important as learning how to walk. Okay. Learning how to talk. This is just basic level stuff that we should know how to do, but we're not taught that. What we're taught is how to communicate better. Now, here's the problem with focusing on how to communicate better when you haven't learned how to navigate each other's frailties. You cannot communicate well when you're making yourself wrong and someone else. You can't. You cannot do it well. Why? Because you're very focused on your reality, on your point of view. You're very married to your thinking. You think that what you're seeing and believing is 100% true and real, and you will spend more time defending your position than you will exploring or understanding somebody else's. Why? Because the emotional intelligence is not there to do that. The bandwidth is not there to do that. So knowing how to navigate your own frailties, and we've all got them. Okay. So let's just talk about what an example of a frailty is. All right. These are the aspects of ourselves that come out when we're feeling insecure. Now, again, everybody goes in and out of feeling insecure multiple times a day. Very, very human, very normal, very natural. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's just normal. Okay. And again, another thing that we think we have to personal development away, that we have to squash, overcome, manage, instead of just understanding it's just part of the human psyche and we just adjust to it. It's so much easier adjusting to something than it is resisting, fighting, managing, making wrong, blaming, judging, overcoming. Okay, trying to squash, spending years and years, hours and hours, days, weeks, months in the past trying to understand more. All right, honestly, it's so much easier when you are not frightened of, judging, or resistant to your own frailties or somebody else's. So this to me is essential, and it is the first thing that I teach, either in my relatable program or when I'm working with someone. Okay, is how to navigate your own frailties and how to navigate somebody else's. Because when you do that, when you know how to do that, your level of emotional intelligence goes through the roof. And it doesn't matter what's happened in your past, it just does. Everybody has access to high levels of emotional intelligence when they know how to navigate themselves. Okay? When they know how to navigate their own humanness. And notice I use the word humanness. Okay? Because The way with which we create our reality, the way in which we turn up, how we operate is identically the same. Identically? I don't think identically is really the right word. It's identical in everybody, okay? Now, how we express that, yes, I appreciate, is different. But how it is created is the same. And this is something people don't understand. All right. So they start looking in the direction of all of our differences, i.e., the expression of something, and then hang their hats on that. Now, if you were looking in a different place towards the sameness and you understood how we operate, the differences would feel less compelling, less frightening, and make a whole lot more sense. And there would no longer be the place in which you hang your hat. Now, so many people hang their hats there and then they can't get past it. And they don't realize that there is something else entirely going on driving that, and that you've got to be looking in that direction first and foremost, because that becomes a baseline with which you operate from. Okay. So, emotional intelligence is directly linked to our ability to understand how we operate, our ability to understand how we're showing up, the level of comfortability we have in our skins and our own skin, and our ability to navigate our own and somebody else's frailties. Okay. That is where emotional intelligence is directly linked. Now, when you understand that, emotional intelligence naturally, easily, and effortlessly increases. Why? Because people have less on their mind, they've got more bandwidth, they are more open to getting insights, and insights is the basis for emotional intelligence. Okay. People who have more room for insights, and these are things that are coming through to us all the time, okay, are extremely emotionally intelligent. Now, please understand, we all have capacity for insight. Insight's not limited to a select few. It is available to all when you understand what they are and where to look for them. All right. But so many of us spend a lot of time being focused on what's missing, what's wrong, what the problem is, the differences, all of that kind of stuff. We actually miss insights. We actually don't look in the direction that we need to be looking in order to navigate ourselves and navigate somebody else well. Now, the whole thing that's so wonderful about this is when you understand how to do that, you can do it with anybody. Okay? You can. You can. You can navigate frailties, yours and somebody else's, with anybody. Do you understand how freeing that is to know how to do that and not feel so worried about how someone else is, how they're showing up, where you're not hanging your hat based on someone else's behavior and what someone else is or isn't doing? Do you understand how freeing that is? What the potential to what that adds to the quality of your everyday life? Like, it's quite extraordinary when people start to experience this, because it puts a whole lot of mental load down. Massive. Okay. Now, when you put down a whole lot of mental load, what happens? You feel freer emotionally. You feel lighter. You feel calmer. You feel more at peace. You feel more connected to life. You're more appreciative and grateful of what you have, even the smallest things. Now, all of those things feel amazing. Okay. You start showing up from a completely different energy. This ripples out to everyone around you. And so it actually attracts a different energy back, and therefore different interactions. Your level of confidence grows in your ability to handle difficult situations, difficult people. And what happens there is you feel less frightened by life in general. So many of us are going through life feeling very frightened of life. Now, you might sit there and go, I'm not frightened of life. Now, and I would say, if you're struggling in your relationships, you are. If you're worried about the future, you are. If you're lacking confidence in how you're showing up, you are. Okay? And I just want you to know there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also something else on offer that you want to tap into. Okay? And you want to have a reference point for what the difference feels like. So, emotional intelligence is very, in my opinion, very directly linked to the quality of the feeling you're in, to how connected you are to insight, to how well you understand how we work, and your ability to navigate your own and somebody else's frailties. Emotional frailties, which then become behavioral frailties. Okay. So, an example of an emotional frailty may be someone who feels quite overwhelmed, and then they, because they're feeling overwhelmed, they shut down and withdraw. So there's your emotional frailty that's now become a behavioral frailty. Okay. Another example of a frailty might be someone who is has got a short fuse, tends to get pretty angry very quickly, and then explodes. Okay, so that's an emotional frailty that's now become a behavioral frailty. Another example of an emotional frailty will be someone who wants to go in and rescue and fix everything. Okay, and because of that, they are over functioning. That becomes the behavioral frailty. Now, when you overfunction, the person around you will underfunction. That's the dynamic that gets created. So the person then keeps over functioning, the other person underfunctions, and then there's just this massive gap between people. All right. So these are some of the examples of emotional frailties that then become behavioral frailties. Now, if you don't know how to navigate that, if you get stopped at that point, so example, if you're in a relationship with someone who withdraws and that stops you in your tracks and you've got no idea of how to navigate that, the relationship will not grow. It can't get any further than that. All right. And it just becomes this awkward kind of thing where you are just waiting for that to pass and you kind of gingerly pick yourselves up, but the elephant in the room hasn't been addressed and it just grows and grows and grows. All right. Or maybe you are in a relationship with someone who, when they're feeling insecure, their frailty is to get nasty and say, unkind things, to go into a bit of attack dog mode. Okay. Maybe that might be someone's frailty and it's very common. And you just feel so wounded by that. You can't face it to handle it anymore that that stops you in your tracks. And so again, the relationship can't go any further than that. And it looks like the frailty is the reason why you can't go any further. Okay. That is not the case. And I know some of you I'm going to get kickback from some of you for me saying that. Okay. There's going to be a lot of yeah buts over what I've just said, but I want you to know it's not. When you have a different understanding of how we work, the frailties stop being the things that stop you in your tracks. They become far, far less interesting because something else has become available to you. Okay. And all of a sudden, you start to navigate your own and somebody else as well. Now, when you do that, goodwill goes through the roof. People develop a history of dealing with conflict well. Very, very important. Most people who come to me looking for help do not have a history of dealing with conflict well. So there is no emotional trust in that relationship. It's every man for themselves. You're on a sinking ship with no life raft, or there's a tiny one and it's only got room for one of you. So it's every man for themselves. And so what you've been saying to each other over a long period of time is, I represent me and I represent me. Okay. So when that happens, people retreat to their corner. They aren't there for each other, which is why you get a lot of this. I don't feel like my partner has my back. I don't feel like I'm being listened to. I don't feel like this person cares or that person, right? So this is what starts to happen. Now, this is where something that can look really difficult can be turned around really, really, really quickly. And I see this happen all the time. Why? Because as soon as you learn how to navigate your own and somebody else's frailties well, all right, you show up completely differently. You're not bringing fear to the table. There's a lot more room for understanding, for compassion, for communication, for all of those things that we need for connection, okay? But when you don't have that understanding, you continually get stopped at that roadblock. And it looks like that roadblock needs to go away before you can move further. But you've got to understand that roadblock can't go anywhere if there's no trust. How can it? Talking about the roadblock isn't going to change the fact that there's no trust. All right? People have to start showing up differently in the face of the roadblock. And all of a sudden, that roadblock starts to melt. It's really, really interesting when you see it. And I'm lucky enough to get to see this play out every day. It's one of the great joys in me doing the work that I do, because I get to see that, and I get to see the amazed look on someone's face when that starts showing up. I get to see people going, wow, I can do this. And yes, I can see the change. And people feeling really hopeful instead of shut down and stuck because they can't deal with their own and somebody else's roadblock. Now, you've got to understand, right? Whoever you are in relationship with, whomever, you're going to have to be able to deal with that. Whether it be a parent-child relationship, whether it be an intimate relationship, whether it be dealing with your boss, as I was just talking about with a client earlier, whether it's dealing with the person that you buy your coffee from, or right, that you engage with regularly, doesn't matter. That is the missing piece, in my opinion. Hey, Susan. Hi. Thanks for saying hi, honey. Nice to see you. Thank you. Hi, Rick. Hi. Hello. So lovely to see you here, Rick. Think about you often. John, does mindfulness help overcome this? I'm going to say no. Someone else might disagree with me. See, mindfulness without understanding is just you trying to make yourself feel good. Okay. And you're kind of overriding something. I was actually having this conversation with someone this morning, all right, whose relationship is struggling. And they said, Fiona, I've been listening to your lives and I'm trying to bring goodwill, but and I'm trying to, be calmer, and I'm listening to your lives and I'm trying to do all those things, but it's like we're walking on eggshells. My partner is always assuming the worst about what I'm doing, et cetera, et cetera. And I said to this person, I said, look, the reason why you're not getting any traction is because you are doing this over the top of fear, concerns about them, not being able to navigate their frailties, because all they're dealing with now is each other's frailties, feeling like they aren't doing the right thing by you over a whole lot of stuff. So you're trying to do that over the top of something. That's why it's not working, because the something, the feeling, the energy that you're bringing will absolutely be the thing that this person's engaging with. And you can't fake that. You can't mindfulness it away. You can't meditate it away. You can't, because you always come back to that place when you're no longer in that space, right? So without true shift in understanding, the baseline will always be the same. I hope that makes sense, John. All right. Without true shift in understanding, people come back to the baseline. We've got to change the baseline. When the baseline's up here versus down here, totally different ballgame. Jano, hello, Jano. Nice to see you. Thanks for saying hi. Rick, you're moving to the beach the first week of December. No way. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, Rick. That's awesome. Oh, that's so awesome. That's really made my day. Thanks for sharing that, Rick. Truly, it has. You'll have to send me an email and give me some more information on that. Oh, great. You got it, John. Awesome. Fantastic. Okay. Anyone else? I just want to check in if what I'm saying is making sense and is resonating with you guys, those of you who are listening. So any feedback that you have around that would be much appreciated. And anyone who's just tuned in and wants to say hi, please do so. I always love to know where people are in the world and who's tuning in where. Always just, it's always nice to know. Now, whilst that is going on, if anyone's got anything that they want to ask or feedback around what I'm sharing, I'm going to check in on the questions that I get sent in. And I've got a couple here. 1 second. For those of you who want a deeper understanding, and I know many of you asked me about this afterwards, what I'm talking about, if you want a deeper understanding of how to navigate frailties, of understanding how we work, of really showing up in a way where you're not frightened by your experience of life or somebody else's. This is everything that I talk about and teach in my online program, Relatable. Okay. That's just covered in that program. And, people love it. They get exactly what they're looking for. They get that understanding that they need. And all of a sudden they start to show up completely differently. All right. So if you're wondering how, the answer lies there. Now, getting back to my questions. All right. So first question is, any advice for the push and pull dynamic of the dismissive avoidant lover? The pull of love bombing and the push of disappearing when things aren't perfect. Actually, I think this question has just been answered by what I have just been referring to when it comes to navigating frailties. Because really what you're talking about is when we're in a good frame of mind, right? Things do well. when the other person's not, when I'm not in a good frame of mind, or they're not in a good frame of mind, they disappear. Okay, this is super, super common. This is another way of describing. So another way of describing this, or asking that question would be, how do I navigate my own and somebody else's frailties? Okay, because that's exactly what that is. Now, the problem that we have, and I want to address something in this question. The problem that we have is, when you label someone as a dismissive, avoidant lover, when you put a label on something, okay? I really want you to see what happens when you label something. I'm not a big fan of labels, because all of a sudden people get limited by that label, and people then evidence gather to support the label. And if it's one thing I know we're really great at, is evidence gathering. All right? So I'm not a big fan of labels. People can be, anyone can turn into the dismissive, avoidant lover when they're lost in their frailties. But it doesn't mean that's who they are. It's just where they go from time to time. And as soon as you learn this, that stops. It disappears, because people don't need to utilize that in order to protect themselves. Okay? But just be mindful of living from a label, because when you see your partner as a dismissive, avoidant lover, for example, everything that you do, all right, and see and think, will be evidence gathering to support that. So as soon as their frailties come out, you go, oh, here we go. And you're going to be in your frailties straight away, and therefore not have the emotional intelligence to deal with it. All right. There is a way to navigate through that, where we're not labeling, judging, blaming, projecting, where we are able to bring compassion and understanding. And all of a sudden, the dismissive, avoidant lover feels a lot safer and calmer, and there has more room to think about the we rather than the me. All right. We can all become dismissive, avoidant lovers at times. 100%, right? The dismissive, avoidant lover could be the person who gets really overwhelmed and shuts down. The dismissive, avoidant lover can also be the person that projects and over communicates and gets angry. That's the same, just a different projection of the same, or a different expression of the same thing. All right. So just be mindful of labels, because all of a sudden that puts that person in a box. It also makes things much more personal for you, because you're looking now through a very personal lens. Now, when we look at something through a very personal lens, we get really triggered. Our minds race. We overthink. We overcomplicate something, and we get lost in our frailties. Okay. And then it becomes really, really hard, or harder each time, to come back from that. So be careful of the label, because honestly, when you see things through a more impersonal lens, and by impersonal, I don't mean shut down, I just mean understanding what's going on. All of a sudden, it's like looking at the weather. And now I don't love the fact that it's a cold day today, right? And it's supposed to be spring, like the middle of spring. I'm not taking that personally. It's disappointing, but it just is what it is. Okay. Don't have a lot of thinking about it. Now, this is not what happens in relationships. You got to see these things as navigating the weather. All right. That gives you the confidence, bandwidth, capacity to show up from a completely different place, which is good for you and good for the other person. What I call a win-win. And it has beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ripple effects that go everywhere. Everywhere. So that would be my answer to that. If you really want to have a deeper understanding, like I said, I teach all of this in Relatable. Okay, other question here. Where there's been ill will in a relationship, do you think this can be repaired by just showing up differently without making amends? It depends. Okay, so if someone was doing that with me and I have the understanding that I have, yes, I would be able to do that. I think if someone didn't have the understanding, they would find that harder to do without making amends. So if this is you knowing that you've kind of screwed up somewhere, or you haven't shown up the best way you could have, or whatever, right? And you're realizing this, it is very important that you acknowledge what you've done. If you don't acknowledge it, the other person will feel like you're sweeping it under the rug, that you're gaslighting them, that they don't matter, etc., etc. So you do have to acknowledge it. Now, when you're not frightened, that becomes easy, right? Because you're able to bring humility to the table. You're able to be graceful with it. And you're able to hold space from a really authentic place, which touches the other person, and they can feel that you mean it. It's not some half kind of baked apology, which is what so many people bring to the table. Okay. I see this all the time. They bring this half kind of baked apology where they'll say, look, I'm sorry I got upset, but if you hadn't have done XYZ, I wouldn't have reacted the way I had have. If you hadn't have done this, I wouldn't have done XYZ. So there's this real kind of there that isn't authentic, that isn't owning it, that isn't right. That's still bringing fear, that's still coming from ego, and it's still projecting. All right. And it just won't get the traction that you're looking for. Now, people think that it's really scary to show up that way. I'm telling you, when you understand the way things work, it isn't. In fact, it becomes this gift that you bring to somebody else and it feels amazing. Okay. So there's a difference between operating from love versus fear, which so many of us do. And then we innocently project that onto the people in our lives. And we wonder why we don't get traction. All right. Most people are so loaded when they show up, right? But loaded meaning they've got resentment, they've got frustration, they've got fear, they're walking on eggshells, they're overthinking, they're exaggerating something in their mind, they're complicating something, they've got, they believe it should be a certain way, that someone else should be a certain way. This is what I mean by being loaded, okay? When you show up loaded, you will not get the traction that you're looking for. You just won't, because all that will be between you is that loadedness. All right. I hope that makes sense. All right. You've got to be able to show up where you're not loaded. All right. And you've got to know when you're not loaded. So many people come to me saying, I'm not loaded. And I'm like, oh, yes, you are. Oh, yes, you are. You are so loaded. Okay. This is a really big blind spot for people. Was for me too. Okay. I was extremely loaded and thought that I wasn't, because I'd done so much personal development and so many things. I thought I wasn't. Well, I was just very personal developmentally arrogant, I would say. Personal developmentally arrogant. Is that a word? Yeah. So I was very loaded. So you've got to know that. So I hope that helps with that. Hey, Daryl, nice to see you. Always lovely to see you, Daryl. Hey, Shane. Thanks for dropping by. Always nice to hear from you as well. So yeah, if you are wanting to make amends, right? If you want to show up differently, I think it's important to acknowledge if there's something that you've brought to the table. I had a client of mine. It was actually beautiful. A client of mine that I've been working with. I caught up with him last week, and he shared a story with me, which he just said was so amazing. He said, Fiona, I split up with my wife 12 years ago. And one of the things I've really seen from the understanding that that he's been learning, and the sessions he's been doing with me, is that I now understand why we got divorced. I guess I couldn't understand the role that I'd played in it before. Okay. And he said, I had a really huge insight around something my wife had repeatedly said to me back then, which I did not understand. I thought I did at the time. Like, I thought I got it, and I was so unaware. I didn't get it at all. And so I rang her up the other day and I said, hey, can we meet up for a coffee? And I apologized. And I said, I now understand exactly what you were saying when you were saying XYZ to me. And I didn't see it before. And I'm so deeply sorry. Now, that was said with nothing on it, no expectation of anything in return, completely neutral. She burst into tears. They had a beautiful hug. Now, he said, she's happily involved with someone else. I didn't say that for any other reason other than I wanted her to know that I had finally heard her, that I had gotten it. That took an enormous weight off her shoulders that she didn't even know she'd been carrying for 12 years. This is what I talk about the ripple effects of. Okay. This is what you're able to bring to someone when you truly understand how you're showing up, the flavor that you're bringing. And I can tell you right now, the amount of people that come to me and say, I'm neutral, or I'm not loaded, or I've got this, and they are so loaded, they just can't see it, is huge. Okay. And so sometimes it takes humility to recognize maybe there's something you can't see in yourself. And it's not something to be afraid of. It's actually something you want to embrace, because when you have awareness of it, you have the gift of choice, right? You have the gift of choice. You actually get to choose something else. Without awareness, without any of that, you don't get any choice. And you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, trying different words, trying different things over the top of the same stuff, and wondering why there's no traction. Okay, that is what I call trying. That is, and I know some of you have heard this story, but I think this is a good time, or this Uh, I know some of you have heard this before, and I think this is a good metaphor for where I'm at the moment. This is what I call my burnt chicken story, or burnt chicken metaphor. Say you've got, or burnt oil metaphor. So say you've got, you're wanting to cook chicken, but you've got the oil is burnt. Okay, so you turn the oil on, you heat it up, you put some chicken in there, you take it out, and it's burnt. You're like, oh, that doesn't taste very good. Maybe I cooked it too long, so you cook it a little less. Take it out, still tastes burnt. You go, you know what? I know why it still tastes burnt. It's because I'm using I'm using the hormone stuff. I need to get free range. The free range. That's it. It's all about the free range. I'm being a bit of a cheapskate here using the hormone riddled chicken. I'm going to get free range. So you go and get free range. You put the free range in there. You cook it again. Still tastes burnt. You try cooking a little less. Still tastes burnt. You're like, man, you know what? I did buy the cheaper brand of free range. I'm going to get the high end free range. Okay, I'm going to get the high end free range. So you get the high end free range chicken. You put it in the oil. Still tastes burnt. You cook it a little bit less, still tastes burnt, right? Then you think, oh, you know what it is? I need corn-fed chicken. So you put the corn-fed chicken in there. It still tastes burnt. This is what most of you are doing. You are showing up. You're trying to say the right thing. You're doing nice things. Maybe you're picking up the load more with the kids. Maybe you're helping more around the house because you see that's what you need to do. Maybe you're cooking more dinners. Maybe you're helping out in different ways. But if you haven't changed the oil, nothing will change. Most of you are going around with burnt oil and you don't know it. Okay? And so you're doing all this stuff. But you've got to understand, doing stuff over the top of burnt oil is like shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. Okay? It won't get you the traction. And all it does is breed more resentment because you think, well, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm helping out. I'm doing this. Why isn't it making any difference? Because you haven't changed your oil. Okay? And I'm not saying it's your fault, but you've got to understand that if you're doing that over the top of resentment, if you're doing that over the top of fear, if you're walking on eggshells, if you've got a feeling of dread when you go home or whatever, you've got burnt oil. And if you don't change it, nothing will change. And then you get resentful because it looks like you're doing all of this stuff and nobody notices. Okay? And this is what gets frustrating for people, and people lose hope. All right. They get really demoralized and think, what's the point? No one appreciates me. I can't get it right. More and more burnt oil. Okay. And then you try and do stuff over the top of that. You won't get the traction you are looking for. You have got to know how to navigate your frailties, how to navigate someone else, how we work as human beings. All of a sudden, your oil changes. Now you're going to get traction. Now you're actually going to have different types of conversations. Now you're going to actually see the benefit of how you can make a difference, and you get to feel empowered at the same time. Win-win for everyone. Okay, everybody. I really need to. I need to go into a client session soon. So I hope this has been really helpful for you. And thanks for your comments, Shane. Really appreciate it. And like I said, if you want to know what I'm talking about and how that works, I teach this through my 8-week online program, Relatable, all of this step by step. It's a wonderful, wonderful understanding to have in your life. And I know the world is going through a tough time right now. And all I'm going to say to you is I would rather have this understanding in my life as I navigate through a tough time than anything else. All right? Because it's what's going to give you that ability to feel, more resilient, calmer, have more faith and trust in life, etc., etc. Okay? Truly, truly, I cannot emphasize this enough. Like I say, it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. All right, everybody. Thanks for your comments. Hi, Fleur. I will be back here live next Friday. And if you have anything that you want to ask me beforehand, send it through to hello@fionalukis.com.au and I'll answer for you. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Ciao.